Hello, night dwellers. Welcome to the dark unknown. Put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and prepare yourself. Vacations should be a time of rest, but for some people, they have become real nightmares. Today we're going to hear disturbing vacation stories that actually happened. Get ready, because some of them might keep you up at night. Story 1: The Cabin. I've always loved camping. The feeling of getting lost in the forest, hearing only the creaking of trees and animals at night, was addictive. But that night, something was wrong. After hours of walking along trails that seemed to lead nowhere, I realized I was lost. My cell phone was no longer working, and the light from my flashlight was starting to fail. That's when I saw a cabin. Old, isolated, covered in moss. As if it had been forgotten there, in the middle of nowhere. I knocked on the door, without much hope, but it opened on its own. The air inside was heavy, smelling of damp wood and rust. In the corner, a rocking chair creaked slightly, but there was no wind. And that's when I saw him. A boy. Sitting on the ground. He stared at me silently. His eyes, completely white. Pupilless. Lifeless. Before I could react, I heard heavy footsteps coming from upstairs. I went upstairs, overcome by a mixture of fear and fascination. And when I opened the bedroom door, I came across something I'll never forget. Bodies. An entire family, still sitting at the table, as if trapped in that moment forever. Their rotting faces, their gray skin, frozen in expressions of terror. A shiver ran through me. I wanted to leave, but the bedroom window no longer showed the forest. Only darkness. An endless void. And when I turned, the door was gone. It was at that moment that I understood. That cabin wasn't a shelter. It was a trap. And I had just walked in. Story 2: The Girl at the Waterfall. During a trip through Louisiana, I decided to explore some of the region's lesser-known trails. The weather was heavy, the forest seemed darker than it should have been, and the sound of rushing water guided me to a hidden waterfall. Along the way, I met a girl. She looked about 8 years old, wearing a white dress already stained with dirt and mud. Her feet were bare, and her hair stuck to her face. The most disturbing thing was that she was alone, standing in the middle of the trail, staring at me. I asked if she was lost, but she didn't answer. I just asked for her hand and led the way to the waterfall. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I followed. When I reached the edge of the waterfall, I realized I could no longer hear the sounds of birds or insects. Only the water lapping against the rocks. It was then that I saw something at the bottom. Among the rocks were swollen bodies, partially floating, as if they had been stuck there for days. The girl appeared beside me. Her face, previously pale, was now covered in deep circles, and her eyes had turned completely black. She whispered in a low, almost mournful tone. "They called me, now they're calling you too." Suddenly, I felt cold hands grip my ankles, pulling me toward the water. I struggled, kicked, screamed, but the force was brutal. For a moment, I thought I would drown right there, joining the others. I managed to escape by running down the trail, stumbling, without looking back. When I finally reached the car, my entire body was shaking. I glanced in the rearview mirror. And there she was. standing on the side of the road, watching, with that same empty look. To this day, I've avoided talking about what happened. But whenever I hear the sound of a waterfall, I remember her voice. And I fear that one day, they will call me again. Story 3: Mexico. I've always wanted to visit Mexico. Ever since I was a teenager, I had been captivated by the vibrant images of the markets, the traditional costumes, the cobblestone streets, and, of course, the Day of the Dead. When I finally saved up enough money to travel, I didn't think twice. But what was supposed to be an unforgettable experience ended up turning into a nightmare. I arrived in Mexico City with a backpack and a smile on my face. On my first day, I was approached by a friendly man who introduced himself as a tour guide. He claimed to know secret places only locals knew about, and I, excited, accepted. We walked through busy streets, then through narrow, increasingly deserted alleys. That's when I realized we were getting too far from the center. I questioned him, but he just smiled, saying that the true beauty was beyond the gaze of tourists. Suddenly, I felt something hard hit the back of my neck. Everything went dark. When I regained consciousness, I was in a small, windowless room with a dim light hanging from the ceiling. My wrists were bound, and there were other tourists there, similarly bound. The guide was nothing more than a hunter. After hours of silence and despair, we heard footsteps. The door opened, and two masked men entered. They dragged us out by force and led us to a warehouse. What I saw inside, I'll never forget. It was a kind of warehouse, but instead of merchandise, there were glass capsules, lined up like display cases. Inside each one were preserved human bodies, dressed in traditional clothing. They looked like statues, but they weren't. They were people. On a table were surgical instruments, scalpels still stained with blood. One of the masked men laughed as he said, "You too will be part of the collection." Panic took over. Some screamed, others cried, but no one could escape. The smell of formaldehyde mixed with blood permeated the air. The last thing I remember is being placed in a metal chair, the cold oxygen mask pressed against my face. Then, just darkness. To this day, I don't know how I managed to get out of there. I woke up in a hospital, disoriented, without documents, and not understanding how I ended up there. The police never found those responsible, nor did they fully believe my story. But I know what I saw. And I know that, somewhere in Mexico, that warehouse still exists, waiting for new victims for its collection. Some stories end, but fear, sometimes, never goes away. What you just heard may seem distant, but somewhere, someone is experiencing something similar right now. Thank you for following along. Every story shared strengthens our courageous community. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so now. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories and join our group of suspense lovers. And remember, sometimes danger is closer than you think.